"You'll never understand the life women like me actually want," she said before leaving for a richer man. I never tried stopping her. A year later, she sat in silence watching me receive an award for achievements she once called unrealistic. Equals 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 equals. You'll never understand the life women like me actually want. Morgan said it like she was reading off a grocery list. Calm. Final. Like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror that morning, practicing the exact temperature to deliver it at. I sat there on the couch we'd picked out together 2 years ago, the one with the slightly too firm cushions she always complained about, and I just looked at her. "Okay," I said. That was it. That was all I had. She blinked, like she'd expected more. Tears, maybe, or anger, something she could push against. Instead, she got silence, and silence unsettled her more than any fight could have. "That's it. Okay, what do you want me to say, Morgan?" She grabbed the bag she'd already packed. She'd packed it before she said a single word to me, which told me everything about how long this had been decided, and walked to the door. She paused there, hand on the knob, waiting for me to chase her. To beg. To prove her right about something. I didn't move. "Goodbye, Eric," she said, and the door clicked shut behind her, soft and final, like punctuation at the end of a sentence that had been writing itself for months. I didn't realize it then, sitting alone in an apartment that suddenly felt 3 sizes too big, but that moment, that quiet, almost gentle ending, was the best thing that ever happened to me. It would be a year before I understood why. Morgan and I met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner when I was 26. She laughed at something I said before I'd even finished the joke. This bright, easy laugh that made the whole table look at her, and then at me, like I'd won something. We moved fast. Within 8 months, we'd signed a lease on a 1-bedroom in a decent part of town, the kind of place with exposed brick that made it feel nicer than it was. We had routines. Sunday mornings were farmer's market and bad coffee from the place on the corner that never got our orders right, but we kept going anyway because it was ours. Friday nights were whatever show we were binging, usually with Morgan asleep on my shoulder by episode 3. We had inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. A running bit about a houseplant we'd named Survivor because it refused to die despite our best efforts at neglect. Her friends called us the parents because we were the couple that actually showed up on time to things. Everyone assumed we'd get married. My mom had started, gently, asking about timelines. Morgan's friend Cassandra used to joke that she'd be maid of honor, obviously, and Morgan would just smile and not correct her. I was 27 and I thought I had it figured out. The relationship, the trajectory, the future. I was working a steady but unspectacular job in marketing, the kind of job that pays the bills and doesn't ask much of your soul, and I figured that was fine. We'd build from there. Together. I had no idea how much together was about to start meaning 2 very different things. It started small enough that I almost missed it. Morgan got a new job, a step up, working as an executive assistant for a private equity firm downtown. The pay bump was significant, and so, it turned out, was the exposure. She started coming home with stories about her boss's apartment, about a partner's weekend trip to Aspen, about the watch one of the associates wore that cost more than our car. At first it was just commentary. Observations. "Can you believe people actually live like that?" she'd say, and I'd agree, because it did seem unbelievable. But the tone started to shift. Less "can you believe it," and more "wouldn't it be nice." She started following more accounts on Instagram. Guys in expensive watches standing next to expensive cars, captions about building empires and winning mentality. She'd scroll through them at night, and I noticed she'd gotten quieter during those scrolling sessions, like she was somewhere else. One name started coming up. Grant, a guy from her office, not her department, some VP on a different floor, who'd apparently started a small investment fund after leaving the firm. "He's doing really well," she mentioned once, not looking up from her phone. Like, really well. I didn't think much of it. Why would I? My friend Hunter did, though. Hunter and I had been close since college, and he had this quality where he noticed things before they became things. We were grabbing beers one night, and I mentioned, just in passing, that Morgan had been talking a lot about this Grant guy lately. Hunter went quiet for a second. "How much is she talking about him?" "I don't know, man. Just, like, work stuff." "Okay," he said, but his tone said keep an eye on that, and I brushed it off because Hunter sometimes saw shadows where there weren't any. That night, Morgan asked me, out of nowhere, what my 5-year plan looked like. Not in a romantic way, not, where do you see us, but in a clinical way, like she was doing an audit. I told her honestly. Steady growth, hopefully a promotion, maybe a house eventually. She nodded slowly and said, that sounds nice, in a voice that made nice sound like the saddest word in the English language. I laughed it off. I told myself it was nothing. It was not nothing. Comparisons became a quiet hobby of hers. It started with small stuff. We'd be at a restaurant and she'd mention, almost casually, that one of her co-workers had just gotten back from Bali, or that another co-worker's boyfriend had just bought him a car for his birthday. Just bought it. Like it was nothing. I started noticing a pattern. Every story had a number attached to it. A price tag, a salary, a square footage. Morgan had always been social and a little image conscious, but this was different. This felt like she was building a spreadsheet in her head, and I kept coming up short in one particular column. One night over dinner, a nice dinner, actually, one I'd planned for her birthday. She put her fork down and said, do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd gone into finance instead of marketing? I laughed, because it seemed like a joke. Not really. What? No reason, she said. Just wondering what life would look like. This life's pretty good though, right? I said, gesturing at the restaurant. At her, at the candle between us. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, of course. I let it go. I was good at letting things go, back then. I thought that was a virtue. I thought patience and calm were the same thing as a healthy relationship. I didn't yet understand that sometimes the things you let go of are the things trying to warn you. A few weeks later, she came home from a work event glowing in a way I hadn't seen in a while. Grant's fund just closed a huge round, she said, scrolling through photos on her phone. Group shots at some rooftop bar, Grant in the center of every one of them, champagne in hand. He's like a big deal now. That's cool, I said, and meant it. I had no reason not to. She put her phone down and looked at me for a second too long. Yeah, she said. It is. Something in the way she said it made the back of my neck feel cold, but I couldn't have told you why. Not then. Over the next 2 months, Grant stopped being a name and started being a presence. Morgan's social media started filling up with group photos that included him, work events, after parties, a charity gala where she wore a dress I didn't recognize and hadn't seen her buy. When I asked about it, she said Cassandra lent it to her. I believed her, because why wouldn't I? Cassandra, Morgan's best friend since college, had always been a little, I don't know, aspirational isn't quite the right word, but close. She talked a lot about leveling up and knowing your worth, phrases that always sounded to me like things people say when they're trying to convince themselves of something. She and Morgan had been spending a lot more time together, and every time Morgan came home from a night out with Cassandra, she seemed a little more distant. A little more like she was comparing the night she'd just had to the life she was currently living and finding the latter wanting. Hunter brought it up again, this time more directly. You know Cassandra's basically been coaching her, right? He said. We were at his place, watching a game neither of us was really watching. Coaching her on what? On leaving you, man. I'm serious. Every time I see Morgan now she's talking about options and potential like she's evaluating a stock. That's not fair, I said. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I just don't want you blindsided. I told him I appreciated it, and I meant it, but I also told myself Hunter didn't know Morgan the way I did. We'd been together almost 3 years. People don't throw that away over a guy with a rooftop apartment. Then one night, I picked up Morgan's phone to plug it in. It had died, and I was being a good boyfriend, charging it for her, and a text notification flashed across the screen. From Grant. Tonight was fun. We should do it again sometime, just us this time. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I plugged the phone in, set it down exactly where it had been, and didn't say anything. I told myself it was nothing. People get texts. Coworkers are friendly. But some part of me, some part one wasn't ready to listen to yet. No. I just wasn't ready to do anything about it. That was the mistake. Not the not knowing. The not doing. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were nothing nights. No plans, no expectations, just two people existing in the same apartment. Morgan came home late. Not suspiciously late, just later than usual, and when she walked in she didn't take her coat off right away. She just stood near the door, like she was deciding something. Can we talk? She said. I already knew. I think I'd known for weeks, in the part of my brain I kept locked away. But I said, Yeah, of course, and sat down and waited. I don't think this is working anymore, she said. I asked her what this meant. Us. This apartment. This. She gestured vaguely around the room, at the life we'd built, like it was a stock she was about to sell off. This life. I don't think it's what I want anymore. Is this about Grant? She didn't even flinch. That's what got me. She didn't flinch, didn't deny it, didn't perform surprise that I knew. She just looked at me with something almost like relief that she didn't have to lie. It's about a lot of things, she said. But yeah, Grant and I have been talking. And he sees things the way I see them. He understands what I want out of life. And I don't. You're a good person, Eric. I'm not saying you're not. But you're. She paused, choosing her words with the care of someone defusing something. You're comfortable. And I don't want comfortable. I want more. I want the life that I'll never understand. I finished for her. Yeah, I think you've made that pretty clear. She looked almost surprised that I'd cut her off. I hadn't raised my voice. I wasn't crying. I was just done. Somewhere in the last 60 seconds, I'd gone from confused to clear. You're really not going to fight for this? She asked, and there was something in her voice. Not quite hope, but close to it. Like some part of her wanted me to. No, I said. I don't think I am. She blinked, processing that. I think she'd built this whole conversation around a version of me that would beg, that would cry, or argue, or at least ask her to stay. And I wasn't giving her that. Not out of strategy. I genuinely just didn't have it in me. 3 years of small comparisons and quiet comments had worn down whatever part of me would have fought, until there was nothing left to fight with. You'll never understand the life women like me actually want, she said again, standing now, bag already over her shoulder. She'd packed it before this conversation even started, I realized. She'd known exactly how this would go. Okay, I said. And she left. The door closed. Softly. Final. I sat there for a long time after, in an apartment that had somehow gotten enormous, listening to nothing. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. The first few weeks were the hardest. Not because I missed her, exactly. By the end, I think I'd missed her for months before she left, missed the version of her that used to fall asleep on my shoulder during bad TV. I missed the idea of the life I thought I'd been building. The apartment felt wrong. Too quiet, too big, too full of her things that she'd come back for an awkward, scheduled visits where we barely spoke. Survivor, the houseplant, started dying for real this time, and I didn't have it in me to save it either. Mutual friends did what mutual friends do. They drifted toward whichever side felt easier. And a lot of them drifted toward Morgan, because Morgan was louder about it, had a story ready, a version of events where I was the cautionary tale, and she was the woman who'd finally chosen herself. Hunter didn't drift. Hunter showed up, most nights, with takeout and bad jokes and a stubborn refusal to let me disappear into myself. He never said, I told you so. Not once, even though he'd have been entirely justified. I was working on a passion project at the time, a portfolio of branding work I'd been building on nights and weekends, hoping it might lead somewhere eventually. After the breakup, I nearly shelved it entirely. What was the point? I remember sitting at my laptop one night, cursor blinking on an unfinished project file, thinking about just deleting the whole folder. I didn't delete it. I closed the laptop instead, which felt like a small victory at the time, even if it didn't feel like much of one. A week later, I got a message from a guy named Bryce, someone I'd worked with briefly a couple years back, who'd since moved to a much bigger agency and done well for himself. Hey man, long time. I saw some of your old work resurface in a group chat, the rebrand stuff you did for that nonprofit. We've got an opening on our creative team, and I think you'd be a great fit. You interested? I stared at that message for a long time. I almost didn't reply. Almost told myself I wasn't ready, wasn't good enough, wasn't anything enough, which, looking back, sounds suspiciously like things Morgan used to imply without ever quite saying. But something in me, something small, stubborn, and not quite ready to give up, typed back, yeah, I'm interested. I had no idea that one message was the first domino. The job with Bryce's agency wasn't glamorous at first. I was the new guy on a team full of people who'd been there for years, working on accounts that were smaller and less exciting than I'd hoped. The hours were long. I made mistakes, plenty of them. I had one presentation go so badly that I drove home afterward in complete silence, replaying every wrong word. But there was a senior creative director there named Spencer, 60-something, quiet, The kind of person who'd clearly seen 100 young creatives come and go and had stopped being impressed by anyone a long time ago. Except Spencer noticed something in my work. Not polish. I didn't have polish yet, but instinct. A willingness to take a weird idea seriously. Most people your age are trying to look smart, Spencer told me once, reviewing a concept I'd half apologized for before even showing him. You're trying to make something true. Don't lose that. Polish is easy to teach. That isn't. I started staying late, not because I had to, but because for the first time in a long time, I wanted to be somewhere. Spencer would occasionally wander by my desk, look at whatever I was working on, offer a single piece of feedback, sometimes brutal, always useful, and wander off again. There was a woman on the team, Vanessa, who'd started around the same time I had. We bonded over the shared experience of being the new people, eating lunch at our desks because we didn't know anyone well enough yet to do otherwise. She became, without either of us really naming it, the kind of friend who notices when you're having a bad day before you've said anything. "You good?" she asked me once, a few months in, after I'd gone quiet during a meeting. "Yeah, just an anniversary thing. Doesn't matter. It matters if it's making you quiet," she said, and went back to her sketchbook and didn't push. That was Vanessa, present, but never demanding. Progress was slow. I wasn't suddenly brilliant. I had failures, a campaign concept that got killed in front of the whole team, a client meeting where I froze up and Bryce had to step in and save it. Each failure stung, but each one also taught me something, and slowly, almost without my noticing, I started to feel like myself again. Not the self from before Morgan, someone new, steadier, less interested in being liked, more interested in being good. About 8 months in, Spencer pulled me aside after a meeting. "There's an industry showcase coming up in the spring," he said. "Young creatives, portfolio review, the whole thing. I think you should submit something." "Me? You? Don't argue with me, just do it." I did it. I had no idea, submitting that portfolio late one night with coffee gone cold beside my keyboard, that I was setting something in motion that would eventually put me in a room with the last person on earth I expected to see. I want to be clear about something. I never went looking for information about Morgan. I deleted her number, unfollowed her everywhere, done the things people tell you to do to move on. And mostly, it worked. Months would go by where I genuinely didn't think about her at all. But information has a way of finding you anyway, especially when you still have mutual friends, however distant. It was Hunter, mostly, who'd occasionally mention something, not to dig, just because it came up. Saw Cassandra posted something about Morgan in Grant's place. Looks like a lot of upkeep for an apartment. I hadn't asked. He told me anyway, the way friends do when they're testing whether a wound has closed. It had mostly. I just nodded and changed the subject. A few weeks later, something else. Grant's fund's been having a rough year, apparently. Couple of his investors pulled out. Word is it's getting tense. Again, I hadn't asked. I didn't feel triumphant hearing it, which surprised me a little. Mostly, I just felt distant from it, like hearing about weather in a city I used to live in. Then, a bit after that, Cassandra and Morgan had some kind of falling out, I guess. Haven't seen them post together in months. I didn't ask why. I didn't really care why. What struck me more was how little I cared. How the version of me that used to track Morgan's every move, even unconsciously, just wasn't there anymore. I'd built an entire life that didn't have room in it for her, without ever deciding to. Vanessa, who knew the broad shape of my history by then, caught me looking thoughtful one afternoon and asked what was on my mind. "Nothing, really," I said. "Just realized I haven't thought about my ex in weeks. And then I thought about the fact that I just thought about her. So now I'm thinking about her again, a little, because of the thinking about not thinking about her." Vanessa laughed. "That's the most male explanation of healing I've ever heard." "Fair," I said, and we both went back to work. I had no real sense of where Morgan's life was headed, and honestly, I didn't need one. I had my own life to focus on, a life that, for the first time in a long while, felt like it was actually mine. What I didn't know was that my life and hers were about to occupy the same room again. Soon. The portfolio review Spencer pushed me toward turned into something bigger than either of us expected. One of the panel judges, a creative director at a much larger firm, reached out a few weeks later about a project, a rebrand for a mid-sized company expanding nationally, the kind of high-visibility work that could genuinely change a career. Bryce fought to get our small team on it. We won the pitch. The work that followed was some of the hardest, most consuming months of my professional life, and also, strangely, some of the most fun. I felt sharp in a way I hadn't in years. Spencer's fingerprints were all over my instincts by then, but the work itself was mine. The campaign launched. It did well, better than well. It got picked up by a couple of industry publications as a case study. And then, a few months after that, I got an email that I read 3 times before I believed it. I'd been nominated for an Emerging Creative Award, a real one, the kind with an actual ceremony, actual industry people, the kind of thing that 2 years earlier would have sounded to me like something that happened to other people. I called Hunter immediately. He was, predictably, more excited than I was. Dude, do you understand what this is? I mean, kind of. This is the thing. This is the thing, man. You have to let me come. Obviously you're coming. The event was being organized, I learned, by a woman named Autumn. Sharp, efficient, the kind of organizer who remembers everyone's name and never seems stressed, even when everything around her clearly is. She walked our small group through the format, a panel discussion, a few award presentations, a reception afterward. Industry people, press, a few hundred attendees. It's a bigger deal than people think. Autumn told me, going over the schedule. A lot of people who matter in this space will be in that room. I thought about something. Then, a memory I hadn't touched in a long time. Morgan, early on in my time with Bryce's agency, asking what my real plan was, in that tone she used when she already knew the answer disappointed her. I want to do something like this eventually, I told her once, showing her a feature about an industry award ceremony. That'd be amazing. She'd laughed. Not meanly, exactly, just with the easy confidence of someone explaining something obvious to someone slower. Babe, that's not really realistic for people like us. That's a different world. I hadn't thought about that conversation in over a year. I thought about it now, standing in Autumn's office, looking at a schedule with my name on it. I didn't know it yet, but someone else was going to be in that room too. And she had no idea I'd be the one standing on stage. The night of the ceremony, the venue was lit the way these things always are, warm, golden, expensive feeling without being gaudy. Round tables, low conversation, the particular hum of a room full of people who are all, in some quiet way, evaluating each other. Hunter sat next to me, practically vibrating. You good? Yeah, I said and meant it. I wasn't nervous, not really. I'd done the work. Whatever happened tonight, the work was already real. The panel discussion went fine, better than fine, actually. I found I had things to say, and people seemed to want to hear them, which still felt slightly unbelievable to me even as it was happening. Then came the awards portion. Autumn moved through the program smoothly, category by category, and when she got to mine, I heard her say the name of the project before she said my name. And then she said my name, and the room was clapping, and Hunter was practically shouting next to me. And I stood up and walked toward the stage feeling like I was watching myself do it from somewhere slightly outside my own body. I said a few words, short, mostly thank yous, Spencer's name in there, Bryce's, Vanessa's. I kept it simple. I'd never been someone who liked being the center of attention, and that hadn't changed even with an award in my hand. Walking back to my seat, applause still settling around the room, I scanned the tables out of habit, the way you do after a moment like that, looking for familiar faces, for Hunter's grin. And that's when I saw her. Morgan. She was a few tables back, seated near the edge, in a dress that looked expensive but somehow tired on her. Or maybe that was just my imagination filling in details that weren't really there. She wasn't with anyone I recognized. She was sitting very still, hands in her lap, and she was looking directly at me. She must have come with someone connected to the industry. A +1, maybe, to whoever she was with now. I didn't know, and in that moment, I realized I didn't care to know. What I noticed, more than anything, was her face. Not shocked exactly. Something quieter than shock. Something that looked almost like recognition, not of me, but of something else. Of a version of a future she'd once described to me as the realistic one. Sitting 2 years too late, watching the unrealistic one happen to someone else. I didn't smile at her. I didn't look away dramatically either. I just held her gaze for maybe 2 seconds, long enough to register that she was there, long enough for her to know that I'd seen her. And then I sat back down next to Hunter, who was still talking about something, and I let myself be back in the moment that was actually mine. I didn't think about her again for the rest of the night. Not because I was trying not to, because there genuinely wasn't room. I saw her once more, near the end of the night, by the coat check. She was alone, scrolling through her phone in that aimless way people do when they're avoiding being looked at. Eric, she said, when she noticed me. Hey, Morgan. My voice came out even. Not cold. Just even. Congratulations, she said. That's really great. Really impressive. Thanks. There was a pause. I could see her deciding whether to say more, the way people do when they're holding something they're not sure they're allowed to put down. I didn't know you were, she started, and didn't finish it. I didn't know you were capable of this, hung in the air unsaid, and we both heard it anyway. Yeah, I said. Things worked out. That's good, she said, and for a second, just a second, something flickered across her face that looked almost like grief. Not for me. For a version of her own life. Maybe. For a bet she'd made that hadn't paid off the way the math had promised. I should go find my friend, I said. Take care, Morgan. Yeah, she said. You too. I walked away. I didn't look back, not out of spite, but because there wasn't a reason to. The conversation was over the moment it started. There was nothing left between us that needed saying, and nothing I wanted from her, not even an apology. Hunter found me by the exit, holding both our coats. You good? Yeah, I said, and this time it wasn't even a question I had to think about. I'm good. We walked out into the night air, the city loud and bright around us, and I thought about how strange it was that the thing I'd once been told would never happen for people like us had just happened, in a room I'd just walked out of, while the person who'd said it sat watching from a few tables back. She'd finally understood the life she wanted. It just wasn't mine anymore.